All right, you guys are ready to go.
Well,
All right. Yep.
I was going to say I could make a motion to approve the minutes unless anyone had any changes from last time.
I second that motion.
Cool. All in
Everybody
favor?
Aye. Yep.
Aye.
Thumbs up. Cool. All right.
I don't believe there's anybody, there's no persons present, not on the agenda. And Ted Zislis is not here. If he comes on, then you guys can review his member application. So I think we should just go ahead and go into the consultant's presentation.
All right.
Hi, Jared or Kevin, did you want to say anything before I jump in?
Go ahead, Kevin.
I don't, because you probably can't hear me.
We can hear you.
We got you, Kevin. Oh, you went on mute now.
I really didn't have anything to add. I was just letting you know I was here.
Okay. Sounds good.
I'll just go ahead and say, thanks, Matthew, for joining us. Just for everyone, we're pretty early on in this process, but we at least wanted to get some information out to you guys. And so thanks so much for having this special meeting so that we could present where we're at and get some feedback and keep this mobility study process moving forward and hopefully get some good input at some summer events that we have coming up.
Cool. So yeah, I just have a very brief presentation, about 5 slides that won't take too long. But before I jump into that, I'll just kind of introduce myself. So my name is Matthew Downey. I'm a transportation planner for a consulting firm called Felsberg, Holt & Ulevig. We're a transportation engineering planning firm in the Denver metro area. And I've been doing this for about 8 years. I specialize mostly in bicycle, pedestrian, and trail planning. So it's really, really cool that you guys have this commission. A lot of towns don't have something quite like this. So really happy to have some time to talk with you all. My coworker, Elizabeth, is also on the call just to kind of help me listen in and take note of anything you guys want to tell us. She's a planner as well. And yeah, so I think this can be pretty casual. I'll step through some slides, just kind of outlining basically what the focus of this project is, some of the early things we're going to be doing on, and then kind of open it up to any input you all have on what comes next. And so I'm going to share my screen. Okay, so maybe some of you are probably aware, originally this was being kind of branded as the Multi-Modal Mobility and Access Plan, M3AP, and just in some early discussions and just for your awareness, we kind of formally kicked this off about 2 weeks ago, had a meeting with Jared and Kevin and Kelly just to get some rolls rolling. And in that discussion, Multi-Modal Mobility and Access Plan is quite a mouthful. So we're trying to think of a little simpler way to kind of brand this to folks, and so they kind of understand what we're trying to do. So where we've sort of settled is on MAP Carbondale, and MAP is Mobility and Access Plan. And we're still kind of finalizing some like logo ideas that I can pull up to show you, but that's kind of where we're settled. So if you saw M3AP in the past, this is what it has turned into. And so really, this is a kind of a transportation study really focused on making Carbondale a better place to walk and bike and get around by whatever mode you want to. And so it's really focused on, really focused on just kind of identifying what are the issues related to mobility around Carbondale today. What are some ideas for kind of addressing those issues, making Carbondale a more connected, safe, and comfortable town to get around in. And so active transportation is certainly going to be a big focus of this, kind of looking at, Carbondale like a lot of small towns. It's small enough that most people can really comfortably walk or bike kind of anywhere they're trying to go, as long as they have the streets and the sidewalks and the trails there to do it comfortably and safely. So we're really going to be looking at what are some of the gaps to making those connections safely, and where can we fill those in. Obviously, Highway 133 is kind of really the only kind of like big, busy, fast street through town, and there's a lot of concerns that come along with that. Just trying to get it, it sort of divides the town in half. So looking at ways, where are the safety issues with that road, and what can we do to kind of alleviate those. So CDOT, that is a state highway, so CDOT kind of ultimately has authority over what happens on that street, so they'll have to be a partner in moving this plan forward specifically to that street. And then, but we're not only focused on the highway, we're also looking at all the kind of the neighborhood streets and what are some opportunities to enhance those. And ultimately kind of looking to build out a long-term vision of what we want the street network and the sidewalk network and the trail network in Carbondale to look like in the future. And so it kind of aligns well that the comprehensive plan was finished relatively recently, and I'm sure many of you are probably involved with that. The transportation section has a really strong focus on active transportation, and there's some goals in there that we want to build directly from. So this is a separate project, but it's very much building off of the work that was done in the comprehensive plan, and ultimately looking to develop recommendations for how to make Carbondale more multimodal, achieve some of the objectives from the comp plan. And a big part of that is going to be developing a kind of a specific project list of infrastructure projects that we want to implement in Carbondale in the future to make it a better place to walk and bike and access transit. And then kind of a big role of this project is that, there's so much federal and state funding for transportation, and more that's really geared towards active transportation. But it really helps if we're wanting to go after funding like that. It really helps to have a plan like this kind of in place that you can point to. We did some community outreach. We have evaluated the street network. We know this is a need in the town. So really, this is kind of the first step to getting any kind of funding like that, is having a plan that has, the comprehensive plan has a really good vision for what we want Carbondale to look like, but it doesn't have that specific project list. So that's really one of the most important outcomes of this study, is what are those specific projects we want to do on Carbondale streets to make it a better place. And so I just dropped in this slide. So Jared and Kevin, you guys haven't seen this latest iteration, but this is still very much draft. Please don't kind of share this broadly. We're still trying to wrap our heads around this, but these are some, kind of refined ideas, and maybe I can come back to that towards later, but I'll step through the rest of the project first. So a big piece of this is certainly public engagement. We really want this to be a community-led project, so we're making sure the recommendations align with what the people in Carbondale want to see. We know that bilingualism is really important in Carbondale, so she's not on the call tonight, but my other coworker, Rocio, she's a native Spanish speaker. She's also a planner by trade, so she really understands how to translate some of this kind of transportation jargon into Spanish. So she'll be really available to kind of anything we're doing in public. We'll have English and Spanish available. We're working on building up a dedicated web page through the Carbondale Connect kind of engagement platform. So that will be up shortly, and have kind of like some of your previous projects, that'll be kind of the central clearinghouse for all engagement opportunities, any draft deliverables we want people to look at. We're also setting up, there's another tool that I'll show a little example of it in a bit, called Social Pinpoint, which is a separate platform that FHU has kind of a membership in, and it's specifically designed for kind of building virtual engagement tools and like commenting maps and things, and surveys, and so we can link that directly to the Carbondale Connect page, so people have more options for kind of telling us what they think. And then, obviously, virtual has become much more of a big deal in the last 4 years, but we understand that some people still like to kind of be in person and see things in person, not rely on a computer or a phone. So we're certainly also going to be doing some outreach in person, more focused on, so one thing that the industry at whole has kind of evolved from is really like standalone public meetings used to be a big thing. We've really found that they aren't really effective at getting a broad spectrum of the community coming to those. You really have to self-select to come to standalone meeting, and it tends to be not really kind of an accurate depiction of the community as a whole. So we've kind of not shied away, kind of don't do those as much anymore. Now what kind of the main in-person thing that we find is more effective is just called pop-up events. And that's essentially community neighborhood events that are already happening in a town, whether it's a farmer's market, some kind of festival, sometimes just like at a library, just setting up a table with some information, some flyers. So we're going to people where people already are instead of asking people to come to us. And that's way more effective at kind of getting people to tell us what they think than asking them to come to us. And so we're hoping to leverage some of our community, because obviously I am in Denver, but we will be coming out to Carbondale during the course of the study, but we're certainly excited to have any support from people in Carbondale to kind of help us get out the word and share information. So we'll talk about that some more. And then so the public engagement phase, we've really kind of broken this down into 3 primary phases of engagement. So we're just going to be starting this first phase here in the next week or two of just really, before we've done a lot of analysis, we don't want to share stuff with people. We really just want people to tell us what you think of Carbondale, what issues you have with getting around, what you'd like would see better. So this is really going to be more of not us really sharing any ideas. It's more just collecting ideas from the public. We want this to be a community driven process. So we want the projects we come up with to reflect the things you're telling us need to be addressed. So that's really going to be the big focus of this first phase. A little later on, towards the end of the summer, we'll be kind of taking all that input, doing some existing conditions work, and then developing a kind of a list of strategies and project ideas that we have come up with for improving transportation in Carbondale. The second phase will really focus on sharing those ideas with you all and gathering feedback on, do these match the issues you were telling us in the first place? Did we miss something? And then that'll also help us kind of eventually prioritize some of these projects. And then towards the end of the study, this will all eventually get wrapped up into a study report of some kind. And we'll certainly want the whole public to review that and let us know what you think of that. Certainly planning to leverage, social media, paper flyers to help distribute or to help inform people and gather input. And we'll be sharing these with you and other stakeholders to kind of help us distribute as much as possible, so as we can get as many eyes and ears on this project as we can. This is just a kind of so we don't have the Carbondale comment map built out yet, but this is and if we have time later and you're interested, and I can pull up what this actually looks like online. But this is for a similar project we did in Gypsum last year. And basically how it works is we have this GIS-based kind of Google Maps layout map of Carbondale, and there can be, as much prompting or as little prompting as possible. Sometimes we just ask people, give us a comment, but sometimes it helps to provide some themes of comments we're asking. So, this one was asking us to tell people to tell us about issues they have with mobility, opportunities, destinations, places they really want to get to. Sometimes we break it out by mode, so you can leave a bike comment or a transit comment or a pedestrian comment, and it's really user friendly. We certainly understand that not some people are more kind of mobile or technology savvy than others, and we've gotten a lot of good feedback that this really works really simply, and it can be there's instructions and all kinds of things. But this has been more than probably any other engagement tool that we have nowadays. This seems to be way more effective and way more used than anything else we ever try. So we really always try to use something like this in a project these days. And then the other kind of early task that will be going on concurrently for this first phase of engagement is that's kind of the community assessment of the network. We're also going to be doing a more technical assessment of the network. And that's, looking at all the typical data and mapping that we want to look at for transportation. So, obviously the comprehensive plan, we're already pretty familiar with it. We've reviewed it quite a bit, but there are other kind of previous planning efforts that Carbondale has completed that have a focus on transportation that we want to review and make sure that we're consistent with things that have been recommended and told to us in the past. Demographics is always something we look at in transportation studies, just to kind of get an understanding of the layout of the community and if there are areas of concern there. Certainly an inventory of the whole street network with a big focus on active transportation. Where are the trails today? Where are the sidewalks? Are they attached? Are they not attached? Where crossings of Highway 133 is definitely a big focus there. Activity centers, where are kind of the key hubs in town that people really want to be able to get to on a bike or on on foot. And I don't want to keep saying just bike, like this is cars too. This is the whole transportation network. It's just kind of biking and walking tend to, be the more issues of concern in studies like this. And then looking kind of in more detail at Highway 133, looking at crash history, traffic, kind of understanding what is the profile of that street today? What are the kind of the biggest issues we need to tackle there? And then that'll all culminate in just kind of looking at what are the barriers to mobility, what are the constraints, things that kind of we need to be aware of. So we also don't want to recommend anything that's ultimately not feasible, because that doesn't help anybody. So we understand there are constraints to, what can be done on 133, what can be done in terms of environmental impacts. So those are all things we have to keep in mind. And then ultimately, what are the gaps and what are the opportunities for filling those gaps? And just kind of a brief snapshot of what the overall kind of general schedule of this study is. We've got about a 9-month schedule starting roughly now. And we've got, a project management team consisting of us and Carbondale staff that will be meeting regularly kind of to keep on top of things. You can see here the kind of the general, and, in studies like this, things always end up shifting a couple of weeks here and there. So don't take this as kind of absolutely this is the schedule that's going to happen. But generally, the next month or two, we're going to be this first phase of engagement the other thing that I'll mention related to engagement, we're also working on developing kind of a core team of stakeholders that will kind of like a project stakeholder committee that may involve some of you, that we'll be meeting with regularly to kind of talk about review deliverables, kind of talk about more high level about what we're wanting to accomplish with this study. And then the second phase of engagement, in 4 or 5 months. So, early fall-ish, September, October. And then with kind of right now, tentatively looking at to finish this study about probably early next year, late winter, early spring. These next few months also focusing on that existing conditions work, and then diving into kind of the fun part of the studies like these, just developing recommendations and goals that will be kind of the big focus for the rest of this year. And so, yeah, that's kind of basic outline of where we are, where we're going, and happy to, talk through any of this with you. If you've got thoughts on what you're hoping to see out of this study, questions for us, just kind of leave it open.
I think it sounds great.
But yeah, Jared, Kevin, if I missed anything, feel free to add in. But yeah, I'm done.
Matt, Jared, were you gonna chime in?
No, go ahead, Michael.
Oh, I just had a question, just something we talked about at our last meeting, when we've been, talking to other members of the community about this. Just some feedback from them is kind of like, we like how it is, we don't want things to change. Is part of that public engagement, is there like like assets or values, like somewhere that people can write down or add in things that they do like?
Yeah, I think, with that commenting map, and also we'll probably have like a kind of a survey, this intro survey that I think we can add. Like we want people to tell us what is working well as well as what is not working well. And we can, if it makes sense, we can kind of craft questions specific to that. So people are telling us, if they're, we certainly want to understand what is working well too, because we don't want to change something if it is meeting the needs of the community today. And we can work through the messaging on how we're accessing that, but yes.
And just to add to that, Matthew, I think if we hear something that's working really well for this community, that could be a template for other recommendations and solutions elsewhere in town. If some type of improvement, something that really resonates with this community, seeing how that could be utilized in other locations in town.
One of the things I noticed when we had those kinds of conversations with people concerned about the change was that if I brought up the fact that we were trying to make sure that we were prepared for growth and that we were trying to anticipate that growth and be prepared so that we didn't lose that culture. They sort of changed their tune a bit. And so I guess my question is, how do we convey what we're trying to achieve, and that it's not just fixing problems, it's projecting growth and being prepared for that growth so we don't lose that thing that they've identified that they love.
Mhm. Yeah, no, I think that that's a great point, is that this is intended to be like, this is going to end with a list of project recommendations that are not all going to happen in the next year, next 2 years. So I think it's really important to message this to the community. This is a long-term vision for not only meeting the needs of Carbondale today, but meeting the needs of Carbondale in 10, 20 years. So I think that that's an important messaging thing that we need to keep in mind, is that this is a long-term, this isn't like sometimes when studies like this happen and people start seeing like lines on a map, they think this is like a kind of prepping for construction in the next construction season. And so I think it's really important that we message that this is a planning study. There's not necessarily funding to go do all these construction right now. So, but we're wanting to, and I think like even, I didn't really, in this task 3, it really is a current and future conditions assessment. So I think that's I think it's really important, just like the messaging in general of what this study is trying to do when we go out to the public. So I would say maybe you folks are probably more kind of in tune with transportation planning than the public as a whole. So I think your thoughts on how best to message this to the community are really valued and really appreciated. But I think that's an important point, that this is a future looking study, and we want to, and that also comes down to, another thing that we'll be doing in this task 4 is kind of a vision and goals. And that a vision is like kind of an inherently a long-term thing. So we're wanting to make sure we want to kind of, in that vision, what do we want Carbondale to look like in 20 years from a mobility perspective, recognizing that the town is going to grow, things are going to change, and it's not, we can't just kind of keep a status quo. We have to, and that it's similar to, comprehensive planning in that aspect, is that we know things are going to change and we have to equip ourselves to handle that change so that Carbondale stays a really nice place to be.
All right. Can I ask one thing? I don't really know if there's a whole lot of effort as far as transit. I don't really know the history of the Carbondale circulator. I'm sure Raft is in there.
Mm-hmm.
And we talk a lot about pedestrian and bikes, but just wonder if there's something addressed with transit.
Sure. Yeah. So yeah, the transit system in Carbondale is operated by RAFTA. So it's part of a regional route, and there's not really like kind of a local Carbondale run effort. So the big focus on the transit element of this study is kind of focusing on the existing kind of transit service in town, looking at, connections to, is it easy to walk or bike to those stops, but also I think we'll certainly have RAFTA involved with this study as a stakeholder in some aspects. So I think we can kind of communicate to them if the transit system, if there are stops here that aren't in the right location, if there are future desires for transit, that's something Carbondale has less control over. But similar to CDOT and Highway 133, we want to give the community input on what is working well and what is not working well with the transit system, so we can communicate that to RAFTA and share that feedback with them, because they do their own kind of long range transit planning process all the time.
Right.
And this community is really, so if there are transit issues, we want to understand those as well, so we can communicate those to transit operators.
Yeah, I've always been curious why there was a circulator that only did half the town. I mean, I'm sure there's a reason. I just never heard it.
I can offer some advice, but I don't want to take over this meeting on that. Essentially, from a transit perspective, in order to get people to utilize transit, it needs to have some key components, and one of those is frequency. The other is trip length. And so by running a transit bus through a lot of other towns, or a lot of other portions of this town, you start to negatively impact those key components. And so a trip that might take, let's say, a 30-minute loop becoming a 45-minute loop or an hour loop becomes a lot less attractive for people to choose to use transit. Likewise, a trip length that might have only taken them 5 minutes from one stop to where they're ultimately trying to get going. Doubling or tripling, you know, they'll look for other opportunities. And then you have a lot of other factors such as the cost of transit, the number of buses that are needed to run it at whatever frequency. And so you have a lot of those financial impacts. Hopefully that kind of sheds some light on that, David.
Right, right.
Matt, I just got another text from our chair who asked me to do a couple of things. One is ask you if you could take down your screen share so that he can see prompts, because he can see and hear but can't say anything. And Kay, he wanted me to make sure that you knew that he has been on the whole time and that he can see and hear but not say anything. And I suspect if he has anything else he wants to say, I'll get a text and announce that. Thank you.
Sure.
Hey, real quickly, back to David's question, and Chris, you can probably speak to this, being here most of your life or all your life. I believe that the reason that the circulator does what it does is because that's what it did before the park and ride, basically. And that was because of that, they continued that service. If you look at like Glenwood and Aspen and some of the other communities that actually pay for their local service, RAFTA basically said, we'll keep doing what we were doing in Carbondale before the park and ride, and you don't have to pay any more for it.
Right. Yeah, and I believe there might have even been they might have defined service in the original agreement with RAFTA as being to the pool essentially. So, but that's sort of the extent of their legal requirement. But I was just going to bring up, I think it looks great all around. I think you really absorbed the prompt sort of from what we were hoping to see, I think. I think one thing I might consider adding to like the assessment portion would be to, if you're going to come up and do like some pop-ups, you should maybe come and do like a ride around or something with a couple of people. Because then you can, that's the best way to just experience stuff in real time of like, well, here we came to this spot and we're having this difficulty here. I think that's like the best on the ground, just sort of understanding, you know. So I think if we can just add it on to, you know, one of the sessions where we're coming up to having you come up to engage with people. And I don't know how big of a group or whatever, but I think that would be useful for you. So.
Sure. Thanks.
Well, maybe we should.
Does anybody have any other thoughts or?
One other quick thing I'll add, just kind of in terms of this first round of engagement. So we're targeting your first Friday. Jared said that's always kind of a big deal in Carbondale, the first Friday events. So we're really kind of ramping up, trying to get a lot of stuff set up so that we can have, our plan is to at least get, so I won't be up there next Friday, but get some flyers put together with, you know, links to some basic information about the study, some links to the webpage, so that can be kind of handed out at the first Friday event. So we'll have that commenting map I mentioned, and a survey ready to go by then. And so that's really going to be kind of basically our launch of engagement is that first Friday. And then, you know, for the next, you know, most of July into August, we'll probably kind of be focused on getting that initial input. So that's kind of our target for the immediate next steps.
Does anybody have any thoughts on the MAP Carbondale acronym and tag name?
It's much better.
I like it.
Awesome. Glad to hear that.
Yeah, if you guys are thinking of additional opportunities, the The farmer's market gets a lot of good traffic. It's every Wednesday. I don't know if there are open spots, but let's run through the chamber, I believe, or someone at the town.
Yeah, the farmer's market.
Since it's our street, I guarantee you we can get a spot.
And
Great.
one thing that I can't remember if it was Brad or David pointed out, there is something happening this Wednesday. It's like a bike to work day, and they offered us, if we have any info, we can bring it there. It sounds like that might be a little too last minute and too soon, but in case there is any printed or public ready material, one of us might be able to drop it by there.
Okay, yeah, that might be a little quick, but we can, Jared, maybe we can touch base tomorrow, see if there's something we want to throw together. It's just a little teaser.
All right. Well, we're without the chair, so
Well, thank you all for the feedback. It's greatly appreciated. And if you think of anything else, don't hesitate to, let Kevin or myself know. And, we can get that information over to Matthew and FHU. At this point, any and all input is great input. And, hopefully once we can get the mapping exercise up on the website, we can work with you guys to help spread the word as widely as we can. So thank you all very much.
Yeah, appreciate your time.
Thank you guys.
thanks, Matthew. Thanks, Elizabeth.
Anybody have anything else? If not, I would say we're adjourning.
I wonder if anybody wants to make a motion to or if there's any discussion around appointing a vice chair, if anyone cares about that. If anyone would like to put their name out, I guess.
Yeah, that's probably a good idea. We don't have like do any of the other Chris, do you know if any other committees have like a job description of chair and vice chair? It's just kind of informal, someone who can help out if Matt's not around.
I don't know. I'm not sure if that's defined in the thing that we're doing, but yeah, maybe Kate knows better.
Yeah, so I know that the Park and Rec Commission has both a chair and a vice chair, and that is part of their the ordinance that created that commission. So that might be a good place to look for a job description.
Great. Well, maybe we can circle back on this next meeting, but I think it'd be good if we could institute that at least next meeting.
That sounds good.
How about folks think about that, and then we do have it as an agenda topic at the next meeting? Does that work for you, Chris?
That sounds great.
Do we need to discuss Ted's application?
He's not on the call, and I didn't get any kind of communication. So we can table that until he's here.
That makes sense.
Cool. Well, so far so good in terms of how the application looks, and it sounds like maybe a CAFKey liaison. So yeah, that's cool.
Mhm. All right. Motion to adjourn. Anybody have any other topics or anything? But yeah. All right.
That's
I'll
it.
second that.
All right. There we go. All right, everybody. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.